Forgetting her keys, the doctor returned home and tiptoed into the house. But she could barely hear her husband and his lover's conversation. "Becky, where are my watches? Can't find them." The morning rush to work was in full swing. Leon was a businessman and never parted with the watches that Becca's father, Mr. Mendoza, had given him. They had been married for almost 10 years and were preparing to celebrate their wedding anniversary soon. However, the mood was far from celebratory. "No idea. Maybe you left them where you stayed overnight the day before yesterday?" she asked indignantly. Leo rolled his eyes. He had thick shoulder-length hair with curly ends. He was slender but statuesque, very handsome. He would have been better suited to playing drums in a band, but Leon was not inclined to be creative. He had been taught to count numbers well, and Becca's father, being a businessman, took Leon as his assistant. Over the years, the company passed into his full control. Becca's parents considered him their son and loved him very much. Everyone envied Becca. She snagged such a handsome guy. They met in school, attended the same class after Becca transferred to their school in the 10th grade. She was a straight A student, just like Leon. Academic rivalry turned into love. It was like a fairy tale. They kissed in an empty classroom, afraid of being caught. Then, of course, they were caught together, not by just anyone, but by a teacher. She summoned Leo and Becca's parents to school, knowing that Becca's parents were very influential people. The teacher was one of those who believed that a person should only be interested in knowledge in life. She sarcastically recounted how badly the young people behaved. Becca's father listened to her and reached out to Leon. "My name is Nicholas." "Leo." "Very nice to meet you, Leon. Tell me, what happened with you guys?" Becca remained silent. She was taught from childhood not to interrupt her father. The teacher, on the other hand, was terribly surprised by such a conversation. She had hoped for a grand scandal. "We were kissing because we love each other." "Well, I definitely do." "Don't scold Becca." "And in the classroom, because she doesn't go out for walks in the evenings." "Well, when are we going to see her again?" Leo realized that he had become too frank and fell silent. His mom shyly lowered her eyes. And Nicholas smiled. "Becca, what do you say? Are you in love too, or haven't you figured it out yet?" The father adored his daughter and had long wanted her to be interested in something other than chemistry and biology. She was very good-looking. "Yes," sighed the daughter. "Well, then it's settled. Leon, come to our house in the evening if your mom doesn't mind, of course. When all the lessons are done, you can hang out, watch a movie. We'll be glad to see you." The teacher just opened her mouth. Leo and Becca nodded, and they all left the classroom, leaving the teacher in bewildered feelings. That's how their romance began. However, everything didn't go as smoothly in the first year of their relationship. Arguments started, mistrust arose. There were small moments that served as a catalyst. And then everything went downhill like a snowball. Resentments grew, trust faded. They got married right after high school at 18. Then both went to study, lived together in Becca's parents' house. It was large, even too large. And Leon's mom often went to visit relatives abroad. Plus, Leon's mom passed away, and he just couldn't go back to their room in the dormitory where he had spent his whole life. It seemed to him that everything in that place had also become dead. It hurt, but Becca and her family supported Leon. His mother's death was sudden, a stroke. At that time, Leo, who didn't know his father, became attached to Mr. Mendoza. And he, always dreaming of a son, accepted Nicholas as his own. Years passed. Becca studied to become a doctor, completed her residency. The learning process was lengthy and demanding, and she seemed to grow apart from Leo. And then she became fully immersed in her work. Becca was not one to fear what others might think or say about her. Sometimes her honesty was mistaken for aggression, and she faced difficulties because of it. She didn't make friends at work, only gossips and those who feared Becca. In fact, even the head of the department was afraid of her. Becca excelled in everything, so she was recommended to the main city hospital, where all the local officials and wealthy people sought treatment. When Leo and Becca celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary, she began talking about having children. Becca had settled into her job, but the marriage was falling apart. She didn't want to go home. They had long stopped sharing a bed. Nicholas started sleeping in Mr. Mendoza's room since it had become empty after the terrible accident that took the lives of Becca's parents. This tragedy had a strong impact on the young woman. Now she wanted children even more, to make the house not feel empty and cold. However, they couldn't conceive. Becca underwent a bunch of tests, and so did Leon. Although he wasn't particularly keen on having children, he understood, after 8 years of marriage, he simply couldn't refuse his wife. It's a must, so it's a must. Leo underwent tests, and problems were found in both of them. Not critical, but still, there were chronic pathologies. One day Becca thought it had worked. There was a 5-day delay. And for a woman who wants a child, this is like seeing light at the end of the tunnel. She was overjoyed and decided to have an evening of candid conversations. When Leo returned from work, she gave him the good news. "I'm glad," he said wearily. "Doesn't seem like it." Leo sighed. By then, he already had another woman, whom he carefully concealed from his wife. Both seemed like salvation to him. He loved one, but lived with the other. "Becky, let's be honest. You want a child, I'm helping with that. I'll take care of it and be a dad, but I don't have the strong desire you do. I'm not against it, that's all. It's maternal instinct in you, and it's different for men. Maybe when I see him, hold him, something will change. But for now, I'm just happy for you. You're happy, and I'm happy that you're happy." Becca got up and left. The next day it turned out there was no pregnancy. "Rejoice, there's no child and there won't be. I don't want to have children with someone who couldn't care less. Grow up, and then we'll talk. Other people your age have 2 or 3 children, and they love them, and their wives too. You loved me once. What happened?" She asked then. "Nothing. 8 years of marriage. Maybe that's how it should be." Leo sometimes didn't understand either where those strong feelings had gone. After all, he really did love her. A lot. 2 more years passed. The wedding anniversary loomed ahead. Now, taking Mr. Mendoza's place, Leon was a well-known and respected man. Becca suggested throwing a lavish celebration, but her husband didn't want that. She had long suspected that he had another woman. She tried to catch him, but Leo was cautious. The other woman was the same as before. He fell in love with her, but couldn't bring himself to leave his wife. The situation was complicated. Because Becca wasn't just a wife. Her family gave him everything he had. Olivia, the mistress, of course, insisted on a divorce. She even wanted to leave him because such a relationship was not easy for her. Being the second woman in the life of her beloved was unbearable for Olivia, and Leon was concerned about property division, inheritance issues regarding the company. Becca's parents left everything to both of them, but then they would have to split everything. While Leo had long been the face of the company, Becca was nobody there. And other property would have to be divided equally. Leon searched for his watch on the nightstand, looked behind it. He thought he probably left them at Olivia's place. Becca was already getting ready. She was punctual to the point of nausea. She had never been late anywhere in her life. A great quality for a doctor, but sometimes unbearable in everyday life. "Okay, I'm going. See you in the evening," she said dryly and left. In her mind, she briefly entertained the thought of wanting to kiss him goodbye. But Becca felt like he didn't want that himself. Should she insist? On the other hand, he was her husband. Becca left the house, approached the car, reached into her pocket, and realized she had left her mobile phone at home. She looked at the small neat watch on her left wrist. They were thin silver ones with crystal inserts. There was still time. Becca returned home, heard her husband talking on the phone. He was just about to leave, was in a hurry, and here he was laughing at something and promising something to someone. She didn't even close the front door of the private house so that Leo wouldn't hear her enter. The door opened quietly, but closed with a loud click. Yes? Really? I really want this. Of course. You don't even have to ask. You understand everything. Okay, kiss. At that moment, Becca was already behind him. Leon jumped and quickly hung up. Caught red-handed. Inside Becca, anger flared up. Well, how would he get out of it this time? She desperately wished it would turn out to be some old friend or distant relative and that it would mean nothing. But jealousy was already eating away at her brain like a worm. And who are you kissing there? And now you're going to deny it? I heard everything, she declared. She needed to understand that she heard more than she actually did. Then you might have told the truth, cracked. Becca, sit down. I want to tell you something. She sat down on the bed, anticipating another lie. I want to divorce you. The words sounded like thunder on a clear day. That was it. This was what she had feared most. But some part of her almost wanted this. Why? Becca asked. An inner voice screamed at her not to cry, but tears flowed like a river. She had felt this for a long time but had been afraid to admit it. He didn't love her anymore at all. And she? Sometimes it seemed like no, that the feelings had passed. But at times, Becca missed him and wanted to improve their relationship. But seeing his indifference, she didn't dare to take a step. And now everything? Divorce? It doesn't matter why. The reason, Becca, is simple. We lost our common ground long ago. You're unhappy in the marriage. Do you have another woman? Who is she? I've known this for a long time. She wanted him to confess. Yes, I do. But even if I didn't understand, we haven't been able to live normally for a long time. How are we supposed to live normally when you're cheating on me? How is that possible when one is being unfaithful? Maybe I wasn't the perfect wife, but at least I never cheated. I was always faithful. And you? Becca slapped her husband hard across the face, and he endured it, knowing he deserved it. Is that all? Feeling better? I'll handle the divorce, he said. Becca didn't know what to do. An inner voice told her she was already late. That day, she was 10 minutes late for the first time. Patients were already crowding around her office door with the assigned therapist. Lowering her head, Becca walked past them, hearing impatient grumbles and reproaches behind her. When they feel like it, that's when they come to work. Becca saw patients, trying to distract herself from what had happened. But thoughts raced through her mind with a constant sharp pain. Your marriage has fallen apart, there will be no more Leo. And there won't be any 10th anniversary. You'll have to tell everyone about this. Everyone will find out you've been cuckolded. Closer to noon, a young woman entered her office. I didn't know which doctor to see. They told me the therapist would look and refer me if necessary. The thing is, my husband was with another woman. Well, I just want to make sure everything's okay with me. Becca stared at her as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Could such coincidences happen? What specifically is bothering you? Becca asked. Nothing, but sometimes there's a pulling sensation in my lower abdomen, and it feels like everything hurts from the top down. There's a delay, but I shouldn't be pregnant. We've been trying for so long, and it never worked out for us. And now I don't even know. Maybe it's some kind of infection. Becca suddenly began to cry. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to do so in front of a patient, in front of a stranger. She cried bitterly. At first, the woman didn't understand what was happening. And Becca, realizing that she wasn't controlling her emotions right now, began to explain through her tears that she was in the same situation. Don't worry, everything will be fine. I think everything will be okay with you. I, too, of course, am nervous, but men, they're like that. I cried a lot too, and then the worry started, and I came to you to check if everything's okay. Maybe you just got too nervous? Becca began to calm down. Such outbursts were completely uncharacteristic for her, and she felt terribly ashamed. Please forgive me, I shouldn't have. Oh, come on. Besides, I understand you better than anyone else. All right, I'll order some tests for you now. You'll get everything done and come back to me. I'll call you when it's ready. The patient said goodbye and left, and Becca quickly composed herself and resumed her work. Fortunately, there were no nurses that day, and no one except this woman saw her breakdown. She didn't want rumors to spread around the hospital, but she understood rumors would inevitably spread sooner or later. After work, Becca called her friend Rosa and told her everything in a calm, colorless tone. Understood. Come to me, you can stay with me for a while. Rosa herself had recently divorced. She had a child who was studying at a closed professional sports school, so she was completely alone in her large apartment on the 9th floor. Arriving at her friend's place, Becca noticed that there was already wine on the table, neatly sliced cheese on a beautiful plate. Come to me, my poor onion, said Rosa and hugged her. They sat at the table until late at night. Becca was so emotionally exhausted that she didn't even take a shower. As usual, she had a good cry and fell asleep. Rosa was a good friend, someone she could always rely on. She worked in a law firm and was an excellent specialist. She was respected and feared, they were alike in that regard. Two successful women, each excelling in her field. Sometimes Rosa consulted them on certain matters she understood better. Becca was always ready to help with medical matters, to reassure, to advise on the necessary treatment. A couple of days later, Becca was sitting in her office. She was still recovering from Leo's call, which she received half an hour ago. There were no patients, today was not a reception day, Becca was only working with paperwork. And then a person called, still saved in her phone as husband. I filed for divorce. I hope you won't demand too much. You'll still have money, accounts, including offshore ones. But I need the house and the companies, that's all I need. Inside, Becca was turned upside down. Are you out of your mind? This is my father's company and my parents' house, I grew up there. Who are you to claim it? How dare you even think of it? If only my father were alive. She was extremely outraged, what a scoundrel. He wants to take everything from her and give it to another woman. Becca, I own the company. It was like that even when your father was alive. He taught me everything and stepped back from the business. That's not even up for debate. You, as a shareholder, will have some rights, but until now, you haven't been interested in what's happening there. You'll get your share, you own 37% of the shares, but the controlling stake is with me, you know that. But as for the house, it's a matter of principle. I've been living there for many years too. If everything else stays with you, why shouldn't I give you the house? It's only fair. After all, you'll probably want to sell it. Well, and why? But it's next to my work, I'm used to it. Well, be reasonable, I'll compensate you. Becca boiled over. This is the house where I was brought in as a baby, I grew up there. And you only got into it because you were with me. Now that you have someone else, go to her, this is my home. Leo hung up. Now Becca was sitting and staring into space. Losing her husband was one thing. But losing everything that was earned by her father along with him, that was going too far. She no longer allowed herself to cry, she wouldn't wait for it. He has someone else, he's happy to build his own life. And what about her, cry into her pillow? No, she wouldn't. Becca held on with all her might until the test results of that same stranger, who comforted her in this office, arrived. Good afternoon, you need to come for an appointment, your test results have arrived. As always, the patient got scared, why did she need to come for an appointment? Was something wrong? Becca told her that everything was fine, but she needed to come in. And half an hour later, the patient entered the office. Hello. Is something wrong with my tests? Am I sick? Becca shook her head. No, you're pregnant, and you'll have a baby. And your symptoms also indicated pregnancy, so there's no mistake. You need to decide what to do and get registered. The patient lit up. Give birth. Of course, I'll give birth. He wanted a baby so much. And now he'll come back to me. Oh God, this is wonderful news. Thank you. Becca explained how to find the women's consultation department, congratulated her sincerely, and waited until the door closed behind her. As soon as she left, Becca burst into tears. Again. This time, no one saw or heard her silent sobbing. How she wished she could have the same, to find out she was pregnant and for Leo to come back to her. So he could love her again like he used to. That evening she told everything to Rosa, with whom she still lived. Becca didn't even go back home for her things. She didn't want to see her husband or the bed she had shared with the cheater for so many years. What does he want? The house? Over my dead body. I'll help you with everything. And you'll even try to sue for the company. Let's leave this good-for-nothing with his nose in the dirt. Who would he be if it weren't for you, if it weren't for your father? Becca attended the next shareholders' meeting. She had never attended these events before. In the company, there was the manager, Mr. Morales. A man with gray hair, but still youthful. He had been managing the company almost since its inception, even under Mr. Mendoza's leadership. Under Leon, he also remained in his position because he knew his job well. Becca called him and told him everything that was happening. He met her at the company's doors. I didn't know it was like this. Don't worry, we'll inform the staff. Everyone in the company loved and respected your father. Most of the staff remained, and many still consider Leon a weak replacement for him. Everything is not held together by him, but by experienced people, the department heads who were taught by Mr. Mendoza. May he rest in peace. At the meeting, Becca announced rather calmly that her marriage to Leon had ended, but the firm would continue to exist as before. She explained everything to the people and said there was nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Leo was bending over backward to win the favor of his employees. So he also spoke on the matter. Becca and I have lived together for almost 10 years, but nothing lasts forever, everything has an expiration date. Now we've parted ways and shook hands. I assure you, Becca isn't going anywhere from the company, she's still a shareholder, as before. And I, as before, will be at the helm. I'll run the business, and Becca, if she wants, can make adjustments. After that meeting, Mr. Morales approached Leon. Becca can submit her thoughts for consideration, and you, in turn, will decide whether her opinion matters or not. Leo, you must give her half of the shares, exactly half. You've earned your half through your work here, I don't deny that. But she's the owner of everything, she's the heiress. You're nobody. If not for her love for medicine, she would have been a better owner of the company than you. She's smarter than you, and you're a fool to lose such a woman. And also, I heard you're going to sue her for her parents' property? Leo nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. And what about it? I have rights too. Are you a man or a gigolo? Everything you have belongs to her. Honestly, you should just leave and give her everything. Okay, the company, whatever. Work, manage, if that's what Mr. Mendoza taught you back in the day. But the property. If her father were alive, he would kick you out of the house and out of the firm, like a mangy cur. You cheated on her. You left her and now you want to rob her? You're just despicable. I won't work with you anymore. Now I'll be representing Becca in the company, and that's it. Find yourself another manager. The words of one of the most influential people in the company sounded like thunder out of the blue. It was akin to a slap in the face. Leo walked away to his office. Meanwhile, Rosa continued to prepare the property division documents, gathered the necessary arguments and evidence, while Becca tried to distract herself. She walked a lot, strolled around the city, and just enjoyed being alone. She was already thinking of taking a short break, but one phone call ruined everything. Becca? Hello. We haven't met in person. My name is Olivia. I'm your husband's lover. I'm sorry. Becca froze, tears welled up in her eyes. How dare she call her? What do you want? Becca asked dryly. The thing is, I can't find peace. You can't build your happiness on someone else's misfortune. We both fell for the same man, and you can't control your heart. I'm calling to ask for forgiveness. Please forgive me. Understand me, as a woman. I fell in love, but I don't want anything from Leo. I know he's planning to sue. I just love him, and I'm still pregnant with his child. It's only because of this child that he decided to divorce you. I'm sorry. Becca hung up the phone, tears streaming down her face again. She was pregnant. It was most hurtful that others' dreams were coming true. They couldn't have a child with Leon, he didn't want one. And she got pregnant with him. It seemed like fate was just mocking her. But why? She came home devastated. And again, tears on her friend's shoulder, again cheese and wine. And again, she drifted off for 8 hours of sleep. In all this turmoil, amidst all the stress of the divorce proceedings and property division, Becca received another piece of bad news. Most of all, she was afraid to tell her grandmother about her divorce. She was her father's mother. She lived in the neighboring town in a house by the lake. Becca rarely visited, but she often called her. Grandma Maria was the dearest person to her after her parents' death. She always knew how to comfort. And even when they buried her son, she managed not to wallow in grief, but to say a dignified goodbye and support her loved ones. Grandma didn't cry. She tried to smooth out the already heavy atmosphere. Will those tears help us? Will they bring back my son? Yes, he left before me, and I'm very upset, but what's the use? I'll be there for him now. You, granddaughter, always come to me. You're my little blood. You have your father's genes, you're so much like him. Becca remembered how she had supported her. Grandma Maria was the only one who was wary of Leo. Nicholas loved him like a son, but his mother always had a slight dislike for the fiancé. That's why Leo rarely visited her. Only brought Becca to her and left her there, then returned home. Becca called her grandmother to tell her everything, but someone else answered the phone. Who am I speaking with? Becca asked, hearing a male voice. She thought her grandmother had lost her mobile phone again and smiled to herself. She was so absent-minded. And how could such a meticulous and composed son like Nicholas be born to her? My name is Anatoly. I'm an emergency doctor. The owner of this phone has just passed away. Who are you to her? The smile disappeared from Becca's face. Her lips trembled. What happened to her? My grandmother, Maria Mendoza, died? Yes, Maria Mendoza, that's correct. 78 years old. The cause of death is a heart attack. This is preliminary. It will be confirmed after the autopsy. But at her age, such a death can be considered natural. The autopsy will be conducted later. Becca sighed, trying not to cry. She ended the call and called Rosa. Grandma passed away. I'm going there. We need to arrange the funeral. What's going on? Becky, I have a hearing tonight, but after that, I'll ask for leave. Just drive carefully. You know what? I'll call you, and you'll tell me what needs to be brought on the way, okay? And if necessary, I'll stop by the funeral shop, buy and order everything you need. Oh my God, Maria was such a good person. Be strong. I'm terribly sorry. My heart feels like it's been stabbed. Rosa was familiar with Becca's grandmother. They had visited her together several times. And now Rosa fully paid for the grandmother's funeral. She herself ordered everything necessary. Meanwhile, Becca took care of the memorial service. Both friends didn't need money and could order everything they needed with delivery. But for some reason, Becca decided to bake pies herself. This is what her friend found her doing when she arrived in the evening of the same day. "What are you doing?" Rosa asked. "Me? I'm baking pies according to my grandmother's recipe. She used to make these small, tasty ones and always joked that they were memorial pies. Well, now I'll make them for the funeral. She taught me." "Do you want to cry?" asked Rosa. "No, I feel like I've cried so much lately that I've used up my limit of tears. I can't cry anymore, even if I want to, Olivia." "Then let's get moving, we'll bake together." They finished at 2 in the morning. The next day, Becca and Rosa organized the funeral. They called everyone. There were no tears. Grandma had lived a long and happy life and had always been positive. It wouldn't be right to drown everything in tears. Neighbors, close and distant relatives came, helped, supported. Everyone spoke kind words, but the funerals themselves were a heavy trial. However, Becca managed it. Rosa helped her in everything. In the evening, after seeing everyone off and distributing the remaining food, Becca locked the house, and she and Rosa drove to the city together. Sitting at home in the kitchen, she tried to understand everything that was happening to her. "It feels like someone just pulled the ground from under me. Like a tablecloth being yanked away, and everything spilled, flew away. Everything has changed so much, I don't understand what's happening. I feel like this isn't happening to me. I think I should wake up soon, and everything will be fine. Leo will be there, and Grandma will be alive." Her words were interrupted by a phone call from her husband. "Yes?" Leo wanted to talk about the house. He mentioned that their first court hearing was in a week and proposed giving her $2 million for it, considering it as her share. Becca shook her head. "No. I just buried my grandmother. I didn't know. I'm sorry to hear that." Becca sighed. His despicable manipulations no longer surprised her. What surprised her was how she could have lived with this person under the same roof for so long. "Just think about it. My offer stands." He hung up, and Becca rested her head wearily on the table. When the legal proceedings began, Leo found a loophole that turned the situation upside down and persuaded the judges in his favor. He presented evidence that he had personally handled the restoration of the house, conducted the finishing, and paid from his personal account. All statements were provided to the court. Taking these into account, the court recognized the house as joint property. Leo refused to sell it, and Becca, who wanted to get rid of everything as soon as possible, had to make a difficult decision. She agreed to sell him her share, as he had suggested earlier. The trial ended, the divorce took place, and the property was divided. Becca didn't get the house or her father's company. She could only work there, but she had her own job. So, she agreed to remain only a shareholder and not to appear there, leaving the business to a proxy. The court forced Becca to distract herself from thoughts of her grandmother's death. She tried to suppress the pain within herself, but sometimes broke down and cried. Becca understood that something needed to be done, somehow come to terms with the new circumstances of life. She rented an apartment nearby Rosa's. She couldn't live with her friend forever. Although, Rosa was not against it at all. One day, someone rang the doorbell. Becca was in a robe, and a small Siamese kitten now rubbed against her legs. Becca decided to get a little friend to make it easier to adapt to her new life. "Rebecca Rubio?" She shook her head. "I'm Mendoza now. What do you want?" She asked dryly. "I came to give you valuable documents. You're inheriting." Becca frowned. "What inheritance?" "Ah, you mean my grandmother's house?" "Not only that. May I come in?" The man looked intelligent, wearing glasses, about 40 years old. "The thing is, Maria Mendoza left you not only her house. You're also the sole heir to a fairly large sum of money in an account. And her business also passes to you. She left it to one man, who will have 50% of the shares. The other half is yours." Becca opened her mouth. "Business? What business? My grandmother was almost 80. She used to breed ducks that always swam away from her on the lake. You must have mistaken something. The lawyer pursed his lips and handed her the documents. Becca started to examine them and even whistled in surprise. My grandmother owned all this? Your father was the owner at first. He didn't leave everything to you, some was bequeathed to Maria. Well, not exactly bequeathed, otherwise you would have known. He transferred the company to her as a gift. She was a businesswoman, found herself a partner, some young guy, and ran the business together with him, teaching him everything. I don't know him personally, but she told me that he was quite capable. She trusted him for many years, and he managed everything. She received dividends, of course, and that's how this account with money appeared. As you rightly noted, she bred ducks, almost without spending any money. Now it's all yours. And there's also a small note attached to the will. He handed her an unattractive white form. It contained only a few lines, written by her grandmother's hand. Becca knew this handwriting well. Dear Becky, I leave you my company. It's quite small, but it brings stable profits. I gifted half of the company to a very good person. Trust him in everything, like I did. You'll manage everything together now. Good luck, my dear. And don't cry for me, I don't want your tears. Remember me with a smile. Of course, these lines still made Becca cry. The lawyer handed her a tissue, which happened to be very handy in his pocket. Thank you. So, what does this mean? Do I need to find this second owner? I just don't know what to do. I'm a doctor, not a businessman. I have shares in my father's company, but as much as I want to get back at my ex-husband, I won't bother learning the intricacies of business. It's not my thing. I just heal people. Business is related to medicine. I think it was created specifically for you. You'll find it interesting. Get in touch with Eduardo, he's already expecting your visit. Here are his details. And why do my relatives have a habit of bequeathing their business to strangers? Why couldn't my grandmother leave it to me and make this Eduardo just a manager? Why did my grandmother do that? Same with my father, by the way. I almost lost everything in the divorce. She was still indignant about it. Well, I think everything was planned in advance in this case. Becca Mendoza, you'd better see everything for yourself. Eduardo will explain it to you. Your grandmother asked me to introduce you to Eduardo. Their meeting ended with nothing concrete. Or rather, Becca now knew that she had another inheritance, which she didn't have to share with Leon anymore. She just needed to find out who this Eduardo was. She called him and went to the address he provided. It was on the outskirts of the city in a fairly picturesque area. Becca entered the courtyard of a small private house. Everything around was simple but neat. She rang the doorbell and heard the voice of the owner. It's unlocked, come in. Becca entered the house and saw a fair-haired man in a wheelchair. You must be Eduardo? She asked dryly. All these events hadn't gone unnoticed by Becca. She had become somewhat emotionless. Yes, please come in, Becca, I've been waiting for you. She sat down in the chair, and Eduardo handed her freshly brewed coffee. She took a sip and realized that the drink was exactly the same as her grandmother used to make. She looked at him in surprise, and Eduardo smiled. Yes, I knew Maria well. She was a unique woman, knew everything about everyone. I feel like the world has emptied out for me since she passed away. Eduardo told her how he ended up managing the business. Once upon a time, Becca's grandmother helped a simple homeless man on the street. But in just one short conversation, she realized that he wasn't just a vagrant. Eduardo was a businessman who lost everything and ended up on the streets. He had no support, neither family nor friends to rely on. Maria had already received the business back then, which she later adapted specifically for Becca. As if she knew she couldn't trust Leo. And she made her the owner. But then she saw potential in Eduardo and transferred half of the company to him, which he had been managing alone for several years. How did you end up in the wheelchair? Becca asked. I was homeless and got hit by a car. Maria asked me many times to get examined, but I was content with her buying me a good wheelchair. I didn't completely lose my legs, just partially, but it's very difficult to walk independently. You know, I just came to terms with the fact that it will always be like this. You didn't even get checked? She was surprised. I did get checked after the injury. They told me it wouldn't get better. It would only get worse if I didn't do exercises. Something is wrong there. And surgery won't help in my case. Really? Who told you that? If you have any mobility in your legs, even partially, you can recover. I'm a doctor, by the way, I know. I saw a specialist. You know, it was hard for me to accept that I'm disabled now. I got a pension and lived on it for some time. But while I was suffering and sleeping under the open sky, I got used to not hoping for anything. It's hard to live with hope. I can't afford surgery abroad even now. And I've come to terms with the fact that I'll always be like this. I may feel my legs, but they don't listen to me. Let's change the subject, shall we? She shook her head but didn't insist. They talked for a long time about business, about how things were going now, and what else could be done. Becca found it terribly interesting because the business was related to medicine. A month later, while working on a new project, Becca and Eduardo made healthcare more accessible. Becca now saw everyone who needed help in her own office. She was helping people. In addition, a pharmacy point was opened. The business took off in the first few months. Becca and Eduardo talked every day, getting closer and closer to each other. She felt as comfortable and as happy with him as she did with no one else, except her friend. He became more valuable to her with each passing day. Becca and Eduardo's collaboration lasted almost a year. She managed to practice in her hospital and work in her own office. Many doctors combine private and public clinic practices. But Becca's private practice was personal, which was quite financially lucrative. That day, Becca decided to drop by Rosa's place to tell her how things were going. They had drifted apart a bit and hadn't spoken in a long time. She went in without ringing the bell, and Leo opened the door. "What are you doing here?" Becca asked with disgust. Behind him appeared Rosa, who barely threw on her robe. It was all clear without any further explanation. "And what's this supposed to mean?" Becca asked. Rosa folded her arms across her chest. "Well, sorry, you can't control own heart. We've come together. And what's wrong with that? You're divorced, after all." Becca turned around and left, leaving her now former friend forever. All the way she remembered how Rosa many times told her how good Leo is and how lucky she was with him. When she herself divorced her husband, she started to eye him up right in front of her friend. She joked that Rosa should get a man, or else she'd start falling for everyone out of loneliness. And only then did it occur to Becca what she couldn't figure out before. Of course. How did she not realize this sooner? Rosa and Leo were accomplices. Rosa helped Becca with the divorce, and evidently, not just like that, Leon got everything he wanted. So, he paid her, or he started dating her back then, and Rosa intentionally lost the case. Although, at the very beginning, she assured that Becca wouldn't lose at least the family home. Everything fell into place. Another betrayal, and this time it was simply grandiose. She felt sorry for that patient Olivia, who had been Leo's lover for a long time. After all, he left Becca because of her, and they were supposed to have a child together. What kind of person was he if he left his pregnant lover and started dating her friend? There was no one left to talk to about everything now. Before, she shared everything with Rosa, and now she was alone. However, Eduardo called, and they talked for over an hour. Becca complained to him, and he sympathized. But he managed to turn the situation around in his words so that Becca, after the conversation with him, was even glad that everything turned out this way. It was then that she began to think of him differently for the first time, saw him from another side. Eduardo was a wonderful friend, a great guy who could support her. It was interesting to talk to him, and he didn't hold anything back, he was completely natural. And that's such a rarity. And she thought that maybe he had a girlfriend. He never showed any interest in her. They continued to work as usual. However, a sudden inspection came soon, as if someone deliberately sent all the inspectors after them at once. As a result, some documents turned out to be not in order. Eduardo was taken to the department. Becca resisted as much as she could. She argued, fought, threatened with court, but Eduardo was locked up in jail and not released for several days. She visited him constantly, supporting him. She had to hire an expensive lawyer. Becca knew him for a long time. It was he who once taught Rosa. Thanks to him, she became one of the best, but still, she couldn't surpass her teachers. And it turned out that it was Rosa who was behind all this. Apparently, Leo found out about Becca's new business and decided to get revenge. After all, he himself sold the company for a song after a series of unsuccessful deals. Becca received her share as a shareholder. However, the manager who used to run the company left. Without him, everything went downhill. Don't worry, they'll release you soon. It's all Rosa and Leo. I don't know what else they want from me. My best friend is now with my ex-husband, and she's still trying to get back at me for something. I don't understand them. It's simple. You're successful, smart, beautiful, and they've got nothing, even when they took some of your money. They envy you and resent you. Beautiful? Do you really think so? Becca asked. At that moment, she was thinking about something else entirely. She blamed herself for Eduardo being locked up. How could they treat an invalid as a dangerous person? Yes, very beautiful. And I always thought we were just friends. Well, since we're talking through iron bars now, I'll be frank. You also like me, but you probably have someone, right? Eduardo sighed. He had expressive blue eyes, framed by black lashes, and light hair with a long fringe, massive shoulders. After all, he had to use his arm muscles to move. His legs hardly listened to him. I understand, Becca. I don't have anyone. And I really like you too. You're smart, that's my weakness. I love it when a woman thinks. You just have a golden head, you're disciplined, like a soldier. I just didn't want you to be with me because you're just lonely and wanted to forget about your ex-husband and best friend. Well, that's wrong, not the right motive. But that's not why. I just saw something in you, realized how cool you are. I'm sorry, but there's another circumstance why I don't let anyone into my legs. I can't walk. Why would you want someone like that, half a person? What are you talking about? No, that's it. I'm disappointed. You seemed smart to me, but now you're reasoning like a complete idiot. I don't like you anymore, she said with a serious expression. Eduardo frowned and asked, Really? No, of course not. I like you, but don't talk such nonsense anymore. I don't care about that. What matters is who you are, not what you can do. They talked for a long time, and in the end, they held each other's hands through the prison bars. So their relationship began in prison. True, the next day, Eduardo was released by his lawyer, who made the law enforcement officers apologize. All inspections, under the power of an experienced lawyer, left Becca and Eduardo's business alone. She didn't pay so much money for nothing. The result was stunning. On the very first day after his release, Becca stayed with Eduardo. They watched movies together, talked. She saw how he moved. He could stand up, but it was very difficult for him on crutches. He couldn't walk on them, felt pain, his legs buckled on their own. However, it was enough for him to be able to take a shower, cook, and do cleaning. He had long been accustomed to everything. A month passed. The relationship between Becca and Eduardo only strengthened, but she still felt that everything was somehow shaky, uncertain. She fell in love with him more and more every day. They worked together, came to his house together. They talked, cooked, discussed the news and business together. He cared for her like no one else ever had. Becca was truly happy for the first time in a very long time. She realized that the divorce was the right decision. That's what she had been missing in her marriage. And now she was getting it. Moreover, despite Eduardo's refusal to undergo examination, she found his old medical records at his house and took them to her hospital to a first-class specialist, a doctor of medical sciences. He consulted with his acquaintance from the capital and gave a completely different verdict. Becca asked him to write a conclusion. Eduardo might simply not believe his words. "You know, I want to show you something. Just don't get upset, okay?" She began. He folded his arms across his chest. "Are you going to try to convince me to get examined again? You have no idea what it's like to live with hope that is never meant to come true. It's easier for me this way. I've accepted that I'll never walk, everything is damaged. The doctors said right away, there's no chance. You know, they were wrong. You've been talking to regular surgeons, and I showed your old medical records to my acquaintance. The doctor from the capital is willing to see you. The operation, though expensive, is not so much now to refuse it. And besides, I'll get a very good discount. This is, of course, a preliminary conclusion. Because the more time passes, the harder it will be. I can't promise you that you'll walk again, but it would be foolish not to try. You know what? I'll be terribly angry if nothing comes of it in the end. You have no idea how hard it is. Why on earth did you get involved in this anyway? What are you afraid of?" "I'm afraid to try. To start hoping and then hear from the doctors again that I'll never walk. You don't have to be afraid. You should be afraid of spending your whole life in a wheelchair, Eduardo. Enough already. It's not scary to lose, it's scary not to try." She persuaded him to undergo the examination again. The result was ready a few days later. The surgeon scheduled the operation, saying that such injuries could be treated and the chances of recovery were not small. Eduardo literally cried with happiness when Becca told him this. She stood there and stroked his head, crying too. She loved him very much. While preparing for the operation, Becca ran into her friend Dima at the mall, who used to be married to Rosa. Once they all used to hang out together. "You look great. Seems like divorcing that bastard did you good. He used to tell me everything, and I kept telling him that you were the best thing he had. But he's an idiot." "Thank you, it's nice to hear that. I haven't known anything about him for a long time. And I don't care. I've only heard that he dumped his mistress and went to my friend. He got carried away." Dima's friend frowned. "Don't you know what happened next?" "No. Leo lost everything, went on the run. Rosa went with him, but she got bored quickly. They were hiding from creditors somewhere by the sea. He came back, she found someone else there. Someone with fewer debts. She's a clever girl, she won't disappear. So, we won't see her with you anymore. And Olivia, Leo's mistress, she left her children." "What children?" Becca was surprised. "She gave birth to twins and left the babies at the maternity hospital. She loved Leon so much, threatened to jump off the balcony when he left her. Literally didn't want to live. And he got interested in Rosa back then and just left the pregnant woman, who had been waiting for him to leave his wife for her for several years. You know, he's a very cruel person. And when did he become like that? He used to seem decent, reliable. I don't talk to him anymore. By the way, I got married recently, my daughter was born. Congratulations. That's news." Eduardo was in the capital for the operation, and Becca continued to work and manage the business. She wanted to go with him, but Eduardo asked her to stay. He said it would be easier for him alone. And she couldn't get the thoughts of Leo's children out of her head. She gave birth to children and left them at the maternity hospital? How could she? Becca got the necessary documents and went to the baby's home. "Are you a relative?" asked the employee. "Well, something like that. These are the children of my husband and his mistress. I would like to take them." "Yes, I will take them. she said aloud, realizing that she couldn't do otherwise. Leo, as she learned, became almost like a homeless person, begging for alms, then finding some odd jobs. Becca's parents' house was put up for auction. She wanted to find out the price, but decided to leave the past behind. Memories aren't stored in walls, everything is inside her. She abandoned that idea and began to gather documents for the guardianship process. She had to turn to a good lawyer again. Becca didn't know how to tell Eduardo about her decision. He had other things on his mind right now. The operation was successful, but the doctors didn't make any promises yet. However, they predicted a soon improvement. It turned out that they were allowed to take the children on the very day Eduardo returned to the city. Of course, he was still in a wheelchair, but he could feel his legs differently now. Becca, I didn't want to tell you this over the phone. I thought a lot about us while I was in the hospital. You're the best thing I have. I love you very much. Let's get married. She sighed. I think you might change your mind. I, made a decision here and didn't ask you. Let me tell you everything, and then you can decide if you need it or not. And she laid it all out. She told him that she was soon going to get her ex's children. To her surprise, Eduardo just smiled. This is simply a gift from heaven. I adore children. I would have liked to suggest you take one of the babies from the shelter myself. You said you're not doing well with tests, right? Well, I don't care about that. I just want to have a family. And whether there are biological children or adopted, what's the difference? There are no strangers. Whoever raises them is their dad. Right? She hugged him and cried. Okay. I love you so much. They took the babies and brought them home. Becca ordered everything with home delivery, and soon they received a crib for the twins, a stroller, a changing table, and everything else she might need. I'm sorry I can't help right now. But if the doctors are to be believed, soon I'll be able to run cross country. I used to be into sports, I ran marathons. Really? You never told me. Oh, I dream of running every morning. Kissing you on the cheek and watching our children sleep sweetly. Well, and going for a run. And then coming back and starting a new day with you. Becca took time off from the hospital and immersed herself in motherhood. She was happier than ever. Meanwhile, Eduardo gradually began to stand on his feet. The doctors forbade it, but he couldn't resist. He would stand until his legs started shaking. Everything was going smoothly until this happened. Eduardo, did you take the babies? She asked anxiously. She called him when she got home and found that no one was there. Me? I went to the store while they were asleep. I'll be back soon. Well, I just left them for a minute. The formula ran out. Liza and Polly were sound asleep, I swear. Becca cried all the time. She couldn't think straight, couldn't speak. And Eduardo kept saying it was his fault. Eventually, they went to the police. And by evening, the children were found. Come to the station, we'll sort it out here. Social services workers are already here. Becca called the lawyer again and went to the scene with him. This is Olivia, the mother of the babies. She stole them from the house, but that doesn't change the fact that the children were left unattended. You're responsible, the children will be taken from you. And Olivia faces prison time, Becca was told. The lawyer asked her to exit and negotiated with the social services and law enforcement. Becca, if you agree to skip the complaint against Olivia, we can forget about this. But for money, as you understand, you'll need to pay the police and social services for their trouble. I explained that you're a good mom, caring and responsible. And you're preparing for a wedding. And soon Eduardo will be a dad for the girls. The guardianship won't hassle you, but the worker personally wants to see the house where the kids live. Wants to make sure the conditions are good. Are you okay with that? Becca nodded. Thank you so much, saving me once again. She hugged him, gave money, and led the social worker to their house with Eduardo. After ensuring everything was okay, the inspector left, promising not to bother anymore. Olivia was released, but warned that if she approaches the kids again, she'll be locked up for a long time. That same evening, Olivia knocked on their door. "You? Why came?" Becca remembered how Olivia called her, asking forgiveness, when Leo filed for divorce. And what does she want now after trying to steal the kids? "Becky, take me as a nanny. I'll work for free. After all, I took your husband, but you took my kids. You abandoned them at the maternity hospital. I was in severe depression. I loved Leo so much, he almost drove me crazy. But now I realized I made a huge mistake. I won't come again if you drive me away, but I couldn't help asking. Maybe you'll take me?" Behind Becca, Eduardo appeared. He put his hand on his fiancée's fragile shoulder. "We need a nanny. We were planning to look for one anyway. Let's try. Who'll take better care of the kids than their own mom?" "But what if she tries to steal them again?" Becca asked. "No, I swear. I just want to see them." It was wildly awkward, but Becca eventually agreed. Olivia indeed became the best nanny in the world. She was poor, an orphan, and besides these babies, she had no one in her life. She lived with them in a separate room and was always with the kids. They paid her a good salary, provided food and shelter. She was with the little ones, and that was enough for her happiness. Over time, Olivia and Becca became friends and learned to trust each other. And on the eve of the wedding, Becca delighted Eduardo with the news that they would have a new addition to the family.